How are you guys doing on this Friday evening as we wait for the Toronto Raptors to complete their back-to-back LA tour? Very happy for the Raptors right now, given the weather in Toronto, that they got a chance to be in LA. Um, hey man, what's up? How you doing? So today I have prepared what I consider a five-part solution to solving the problem that is the Toronto Raptors. We'll address a couple of issues. Mainly, this is going to be a film study. Don't expect this to go too long. I've said it before. I'll say it. I'm going to try to stick to this under an hour, but we are going to we're going to show some film. I'm going to go through a couple of games that the Raptors have played and just a couple of things just keep sticking out to me. 4 or 5 things that keep sticking out to me, and specifically how it pertains to lineups that I want to see more of, how to better use certain players, role optimization, basically the same stuff I've been complaining about all year, but just more specific and with some film examples. An example, of course, of the Nuggets offense and just how they run through Jokic and how I think the Raptors can, copy a little bit of what they're doing because they have the personnel to do some of the stuff that the Nuggets are doing. Granted, not as well. What else? I want to talk about Scotty towards the middle or the end of this. I do want to say that I'm working on, well, I'm almost done, an incredible video. It was an idea that came to me today. It was very spontaneous. Um, Let me know in the comments. Are you guys fans of honest trailers? Have you heard of it? Do you watch it? Screen Junkies, honest trailers. I had an idea this morning when I woke up. I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if I could compile all of my frustrations, everything that I do not like about what's going on with this team, into a 2 minute, really funny, honest trailer for this team? And I did it. I spent, a good 3 hours today doing that, and I'm very proud of it. I think it's funny. I think it's really funny, and I think you're gonna get a real laugh out of it. So hopefully that comes out tomorrow, and that'll be fun. Um, okay, so let's get to the film session. Let's not yak on too much. So I've heard a lot of people say that, let's say that Jakob Poeltl does not affect spacing too much. Now, here I want you to watch Jakob Poeltl specifically, and I swear to God, I did not cherry pick possessions. I went through the Clippers game and I just said I'm just gonna pick random possessions, and these are the possessions that I came up with. And I want you not just to watch Jakob because obviously he does not stand at the 3 point line too often, but I want you to watch his defender. Now we're going to go through this slowly because I really do want to explain why I think so much of what is going wrong with the Raptors offense, despite Jakob's brilliance on the analytics. Just watch Jakob this entire play. Okay? Nothing too bad right now, sets 3 screens, and Scotty scores. So that's great. But now watch Zubats the entire time. Watch how Ivica Zubats is manipulated, moved around, or where he stays at all times. And now consider the opportunity lost when a 7-footer is allowed to hang back in the paint pretty much the entire possession, right? He doesn't have to come up. He just gets to hang back, right, the whole time. And look, that shot that Scotty takes is harder, right? Now he makes that shot, so you say, well, great, it worked out. Jakob gets a screen assist, and analytically, woohoo, right? The problem is you have a player like this whose man is able to hang back all the time. You get possessions like this, right? Now just watch. Now the third part of this is the same possession. I want you to watch these two lights and how far they are from each other. Again, basketball is a really fast game. I'm not trying to dumb this down for anybody, but I do believe that in real time, these elements of the game do get lost. So I just want to show this and just watch how far apart these two lights are at all times, these two spotlights. Now, consider there was a reason that I paused that, right? Because when you generate an offense, you're looking for multiple options. Here's option number one, right? And this would be if Jakob can set a pick well enough, right? If there was any confusion right now from Zubas, if Jakob could potentially pop out after setting this pick, if he could flare out to the top, if he could relocate, if there was a larger radius or area in which Jakob could actually score from, then this would be probably a much more complicated play, which could result in a breakdown, Scotty going right down the lane, Fred VanVleet getting open. Because Jakob cannot score out of these positions, it actually does serve like he becomes almost like a tree, right? He's very big and he's a very good screener, but consider it like a tree. And he just basically parks himself out there. But you don't have to guard a tree because a tree is not going to score from 20 feet away or 18 feet away or 15 feet away. So there's no actual gravity being created. Now, if that same screen was being set by Karl Anthony Towns or a Miles Turner, the defense has to react to it completely differently. Now, consider what happens with Fred VanVleet. Now, his man does get picked off, right? But the recovery is so simple, right? And because Ivica Zubas does not have to come up, there's actually no opportunity, which could be potentially to go backdoor for Fred because the paint is not open. Generally speaking, you want to run actions like this to create gaps in the defense. Now, because his defender never really has to react to this, and we're going to see a case where his defender does react to this, or maybe we will, where a team dealt with him a little bit differently. But now consider this is a completely different play, and just to show you, it's not just one play. Okay, now look at where his man is. This is, I mean, you can understand why this is going to help Fred VanVleet, right? But can you see how when they're doing this, every other player on their team is now playing 3-on-4? Do you see that? That's what I'm talking about. So when I say that Jakob Poeltl basically helps Fred VanVleet, that's my point, right? Because right now he is the tree, right? But by being a tree for Fred VanVleet as a pick and roll ball handler right now, you're going to basically free up Fred VanVleet for a sliver of an opportunity to shoot a shot. But it doesn't do shit for anybody else, right? Like, right now, Jakob's out of the play. So there's really only two options right now. Fred VanVleet can score or Jakob Poeltl can score. When you run this action, right, you're kind of screwing over the other three guys on the court. Because right now, if you wanted to pass to Siakam, who's in the corner, guess what? He's going 2-on-1 for a drive, or he's got a contested shot. You want to pass to Scotty Barnes, he's going 3-on-1, and we're going to see that. So even if this results in Jakob Poeltl getting a shot, it's not going to consistently result in wins because there's no way in hell in a playoff offense that you can score effectively enough on a pick and roll for Fred VanVleet and Jakob Poeltl. I mean, you could. In theory, okay, let's be real. You could spam it. He's very efficient, and Fred VanVleet is a halfway decent shooter. But you understand that by doing this, you actually go away from the two players that you're trying to build around, and you go to the one thing that works. Because of them doing what they're doing, the other guys become less effective. Does that make sense? Okay. I hope that makes sense, guys. All right. Once again, just watch Zubats the whole time. He is always going to be in the paint that entire time. And the only thing that running this type of offense is going to do. Now, this is Scotty Barnes catching. Now, look at the defense. Just take a moment and consider when you want to criticize, like, his numbers are down. Oh my God, he's scoring so poorly. And I'm not excusing that, but consider the spacing. Go watch some of the games where he was really dominant last year. Look at the type of shots he was getting. He was doing a lot of what Jakob Poeltl is doing, man. I mean, I'm just being honest, like easy shots around the rim, whatever. Now you're asking this guy to basically crawl before you're asking him to run before he can crawl, basically. In this situation, you are putting a guy who was, again, just 18 months ago deemed a 0-level scorer or not a very effective scorer or not a very advanced offensive player, and you're putting him into a position where he is basically forced to go at least 1-on-3 by the time he puts down one dribble, right? And this is not effective spacing. And so he has to pass out of those situations, because if he's going to go into the paint and, sometimes he'll press, and that will obviously result in a highly contested shot. I just feel like, yeah, he's missing some bunnies and some chippies, and I think that might be health related personally, and some of it is just luck adjusted. But I do believe that the shots that he's having to take are harder. Now, this quote, I love this quote from Paul George, and I just want you guys to read it. Um, I haven't won at any level. I haven't won in high school. I haven't won in college. I haven't won in the NBA. If you're that guy, it's like, how do I win? Like, what do I have to do to win? If it means being a piece and not the whole piece, then that's what it is. This right here, Paul George, his resume is so much more impressive than Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. I'm just being straight up. I'm not trying to, you know, dish hate on anybody, but if you think it's debatable, like, you're crazy. Career wise, what he's done for USA basketball, what he's done for the Pacers, what he's done in OKC, he was honestly a legit MVP candidate. And this is the humility he has because he hasn't been able to win. Now, let's be real, right? He's never played with Kawhi Leonard, healthy Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry. He's never had that health. He's never had that luck, right? He's and so it's very easy for someone who participates in a championship run to then brand themselves as a champion for the rest of their lives. But I'm sorry, you're not building an offense around, Robert Horry and Derek Fisher. You can say these guys have winning habits, right? But you're not running an offense through Derek Fisher and expecting to win a championship, are you? Like, you understand Kobe was a really, really, really big part of that championship run, and you can be a role player on a championship team, but are you telling me Paul George in place of Pascal Siakam and suddenly you don't win a championship? Like, are you kidding me? I think that the level of humility that he's showing here and self-acceptance to say, hey, like, Kawhi's a guy, like, he's the guy, he's won it, as the guy. I haven't, and we're kind of the same age. I think the problem here is that Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam never have to say they haven't won, because they have won. But I think that 4 years removed from that championship, I think it's time to face some uncomfortable truths for those two guys, that as the lead guys, as starters, as featured guys on offense, they haven't won shit. They haven't been out of the first round. As the featured guys, like, okay, like, beyond Kyle Lowry, okay, like, it's just 1 year in Tampa, but this year is an abomination. Tampa was an abomination. You can always blame something else, but I think that this is a quote worth thinking about, that, I mean, what if Paul George had basically taken the Darko Milicic role in Detroit? And I'm not saying that that was the time, but, like, let's say Paul George came into the league and he was, I don't know, like, he was on the Lakers when they were winning a championship, right? I think Paul George was drafted in 2009, 2010. So let's just say, like, I don't know, like, he coattailed on the Heat, right? Like, let's say the Heat drafted him and he won a championship as the sixth man or seventh man, as LeBron and D Wade led the way. You think right now what he's saying doesn't hold true? Like, for real? Come on, man. PS has been a piece. He's been a second leading scorer on a championship team, right? There are a lot of guys who've been second leading scorers on a championship team that you could never imagine being the first. You're leveling up everybody a couple of spots. It's not just one spot. He was not the second best player on that championship team. I'm tired of rehashing this over and over again. All right, moving on. So now we just want to talk about Pascal Siakam and what he can do, right? So I want you to watch Pascal Siakam on this entire play, okay? And once again, like the thing I said with Jakob and Fred, who is it helping other than you? Here's the question of, who is Pascal Siakam helping here other than himself? Does his man look at all concerned about him grabbing it from 50 feet and shooting? No. So why is he here? What purpose could it possibly serve for him to be at a place where he is not a threat to score? You could say, if he just replaced the referee, right, it would create less congestion, Right now, Chris Boucher is on the weak side. Unless this is setting up to be an isolation dribble drive for Chris Boucher, this offense makes absolutely no sense. No, right now, Pascal Siakam is conserving energy by not making it all the way down on the floor on offense. Maybe you could argue this is a scheme-related thing to maintain some sort of balance on defense, but it is not worth going 4-on-5 on offense, especially if he's not the one who's going to score. And obviously, so often these possessions result in so much congestion, which is what's going to happen, that the player who's supposed to score here or trying to score, which would be Scotty or Gary or Precious or Boucher or whoever, is going to face so much congestion that they're going to have to kick out and allow Siakam to ISO one-on-one, which again often results in a very ineffective shot, in my opinion, and just, eye-bleeding offense to watch. Just continue to watch him, man. Like, you think I'm lying, but like really zero in on him, right? How did he help? Like, just this is zoomed in on him. Just watch the entire, like, this is him the whole time. So far off the play is he that he literally floated off this. He floated off the screen twice. Boom. That's an entire possession on offense in which he did absolutely nothing for your team. Here's another one. Like, this is incredibly, I want to say, stagnant. Just watch how other players are moving when he has the ball. Nobody's moving. This is not only really difficult for him, it makes it difficult for him, but it's also just very ineffective for the offense for the Raptors. The Raptors are not so unskilled that it is common or even fathomable that they could take 20 more shots than a very, granted, a talented Clipper team, but not a very good Clipper team. The Clippers are 9th or 10th in the West. Like, they're not some dominant powerhouse that you're facing like Boston or Milwaukee or Denver, where it's like, oh my God, it's fully expected that they're going to outshoot you by 15%. Yes, they are a more talented team. They have the way more talented first option. Their second option is probably more talented than your first option. I get it. They were in a team where they scored 170 plus points against the Sacramento Kings. I get it. This is very offensively talented team with, a former MVP, basically in Russell Westbrook. But I don't think that this team is so good that they were able to outshoot you so much that it completely, there's no advantage to being as ineffective or unintelligible on offense or just uninvolved on offense that everything revolves into this 90s style basketball. I swear, if I showed you a play from 1996, this is exactly what basketball used to look like in 1996. Jesse says, why move off the ball when Pascal will just ISO? I mean, Pascal will just ISO, but it does not mean that he can't pass from these situations. These plays are obviously designed for him to score, right? And I get that. But at some point, you do have to look at something like this and say, everything is so hard for him and for his team. And look at, the spacing right now. Look at where Precious Achiuwa is on the bottom left of your screen, right? He is not really even being guarded at this point. Nicholas Batum has not even made it. Like, Nicholas Batum is 20 feet away from him. This is going to be a highly contested shot, no matter what he does. And I mean, they didn't even send the second defender. That's the kind of crazy part. They did not send even a second defender to your best player. They had an undersized guy like Terrence Mann on him, and you didn't even get a second defender on him. And I think that is kind of crazy. Sorry for the interference. My phone just interfered with the someone saying we need a new coach. Yeah. All right. Now, this is going to talk about shot quality and more specifically shot diets. And I'm not a fan of mid-range shots. Again, I think it's very unevolved to take as many mid-range shots as the Raptors do. Oftentimes you look at their shot chart, and it's not just Pascal Siakam and it's not just Fred VanVleet, although I do think that those guys set the tone, but very often it is just the entire team. And here you'll see examples of just about everyone doing it. You know, you have Gary. I think that was a fairly decent look, but that kind of look is something that NBA defenses surrender at any point. So if you work that hard to end up with that shot, my question is, why are you even working? Because if you ask an NBA defense, we're going to give you a 2 for your third or fourth best player, contested, lightly contested, mildly contested 2-point shot for your third or fourth best player, with the clock running down, I mean, I think they'll take it. I think they would sign a contract before the game and say, we'll give you as many of those as you want, right? So in fact, every single time a shot like that is taken, whether it's made or missed, it is a failure immediately, because there's no way that you can shoot that shot effectively enough to keep up with the other team. You will have to do something to compensate for your terrible shot diet, which is, of course, spamming the offensive glass, taking, crazy chances on defense, all sorts of things, having this insane workload for Scotty and OG, specifically in terms of, covering up for all of these gambles, right? And while I understand in theory what the aim is of aggressively spamming the offensive glass, what I want to point out is, who is spamming the offensive glass? Who is the guy, who are the guys who are creating all of these extra looks? I mean, the last game it was Scotty, Precious, Boucher. Those are the guys that are your offensive rebounders. I believe Thaddeus Young is a half decent offensive rebounder. Pascal Siakam's all right. Who are the guys? Who are the guys doing the work to get you all these extra possessions? Because God help me, if you did not have the extra possessions, you're getting blown out every single game, right? I mean, think about it. Just think about what I'm saying. You shoot 39%, they shoot 58%, right? And you're in the game. You're kind of close in the game. But how are you in the game? You are in the game in spite of yourself. You are in the game because two guys are working their asses off defensively, crazy effectively defensively, to cover up for a ton of gambles. Those gambles result in stats, blocks, steals, for guys who are not working as hard as the guys who are having to recover for those guys. Same thing on offense, right? On the offensive glass, crashing the offensive glass is physically demanding, very demanding. Taking mid-range shots with a hand in your face is not demanding. When people say that Scotty basically coasts for the first 3 quarters and turns it on in the fourth, and oh my God, he's got all this energy in the fourth quarter because he didn't do shit in the first 3 quarters, I think that's such bullshit. It's such a lie to assume that taking mid-range shots and standing 50 feet away from the basket takes more energy than crashing the offensive glass, setting picks, making passes, and generally running the floor really hard every single time. I think that's crazy. So moving on, you're just going to watch a whole bunch of mid-range shots. This Scotty taking a mid-range shot. Here's another Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl. Again, this is going to result in, boom, OG taking a mid-range shot, right? And it's just like he makes it, but it's like, that's a failure for your offense. In my opinion, it's just a failure for offense. There are very few players in this league, and I'm not saying like every single mid-range shot is a failure. Sometimes it should, however, be your absolute last resort. Another thing I want to talk about is Thaddeus Young. Oh my God. Like, I walked into this season thinking he might be kind of in the last year of effective basketball. He could be done. Like, his defense has slipped so much. His offense has fallen off a cliff. He does not shoot. He does not provide spacing. There's so much redundancy between him and Jakob Poeltl to the point where he's missing like layups at this point. Like, what is going on? I don't think you can play this guy anymore. I don't want to talk about it too much. Like, I like him, and whatever, he's making $8 million a year. That's going to be tough to move off of next year with the season he's having right now. But he's a beloved vet. Maybe as an expiring contract, you can move off of him or whatever. But yeah, like, this is just like what he's doing. He's not doing shit for you guys right now. And if you ask me to pick between him and, like, just take a look at this, right? So left side, Boucher, right side, Precious. Boucher obviously has been the best of these three players, and it's not even close this year. But right in the middle is Thaddeus Young. And honestly, you cannot justify playing him over Precious Achua anymore. You just can't. So, I get it. Uh, you want to play this guy, 7, 8 minutes because someone gets into foul trouble. Screw it. Just give those 7, 8 minutes to somebody else. Literally anybody else. It just does not work with this team right now, unless somebody gets injured. If Jakob Poeltl gets injured, Scotty Barnes gets injured, maybe OG Anunoby gets injured. One of those guys gets injured, I can understand why defensively it makes a little bit of sense for you. Right now, it just feels like favoritism, to have to continue playing a guy that's a leader and, anointing him to leadership status or whatever. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to see him necessarily playing anymore. He's not young enough to be like necessarily a development piece, and it doesn't necessarily add up to me like that he's playing. Let's talk about the defense a little bit, right? Like, watch that play right there and watch how easily Siakam, especially when he's guarding the guy without the ball, how easily he loses his man. Like, this is as easy and obvious a play where Siakam completely loses his man, which is inexcusable. He has literally, one assignment here. And failing that assignment, you could say he has to rotate over for, there's one of two ways you could play this. You could either consider this as Jakob's man and he's got a tag, and then everyone's got to rotate over that, OG is going to swing out to number 8, and then Scotty would have to recover over to Kawhi if you look at the rotation that way. But right now, the person who is doing absolutely nothing for you is Pascal Siakam, because he's not close enough right now to Zubac to stop what would inevitably be a wide open dunk. He's not big enough to get him off the offensive glass. So really, you're just kind of like in the way, and you're not close enough to number 8, which is I think Morris. You're not close enough to him to contest the shot either. So you're just kind of like stuck like a deer in the headlights. And I think that this is just an example of probably hundreds of examples this year. That's a really funny question. Who has the best chat? Who has the best not my fault face? Pascal or Fred? Seriously. Wow. Okay. This absolute moronic, this 2-for-1 shit needs to stop. Someone brought it up in the last chat. Like, that was, I encourage you guys to listen to the other broadcast. It is amazing how much they shit talk some of our shot selection. And I think that you would get a fairer perspective if you just listen to people who are not Matt and Jack and Alvin call this game. And they were just like, wow. Like Richard Jefferson when they were on national TV. I mean, these guys gun and bet on themselves so hard on national TV. They want to go off for big games, but they always end up getting clowned. I'm sorry. I don't hear Jeff Van Gundy, Richard Jefferson like clowning stars. They usually are very, very delicate about that. But with Fred VanVleet and his shot selection, Pascal Siakam, like, my God, like other announcers, they do not hold back. And honestly, if we were watching Markieff Morris or someone like that, like it's someone who's not a star, but like, if we saw Dylan Brooks, we saw guys like that just doing too much with the ball, it sticks out a little bit more. It's one thing when Kawhi goes 3-on-1 and you're just like, well, he's Kawhi, right? So you respect it a little bit. You're like, he's feeling himself. He's a superstar. But when non-superstars take stupid shots like fadeaway middies over two guys or fall away, jumpers with the foot, hand in the face, foot on the line, these shots, or they just dribble the air out of the basketball for like 15, 16 seconds, and then they take a shot with no ball movement. It just sticks out to you. If you know basketball, these kind of shots just stick out to you. You're like, ugh, this is terrible. Yeah, man, me too. Again, just watch the defense here. So Scotty tries to deflect. Big part of the Raptors defense. Stays with him. Boom. He's about to lose him right here. Boom. Whose responsibility is it to help? Now, people want to talk about blow-bys all the time. Like it doesn't happen to every single player. It does. When you guard, like when you guard up, you need help all the time. You're going to need help. When you pressure the ball on a superstar like Paul George or Kawhi Leonard, you need help behind you. There has to be some element of it. It's a trade-off constantly. If you don't want this to happen, you have to back off and live with the shot. Now, the Raptors obviously want to run them off the line. They don't want them taking a three. Fine. But then you're going to have to help. So who is actually at fault here for this, right? And it's a foul. Now here, you want to take a look at what Denver does with Jokic. The most specific thing I want to point out here is look at how Dallas is forced to move based on what Denver does. All right. Thank you so much to Heat Check. Totally ripped this video. So the graphics are not mine, but I just wanted to take two quick plays that were of. Now, look at the confusion immediately. Now, number one, how is this created? Number one, it is created because Jokic can shoot. Number one. So you want to run the same play for Jakob Poeltl. The defender is just dropping back with the roller, and it just doesn't have the same effect, which is why it's so important that you have 5 players who can actually competently shoot on the court, which is what the Denver Nuggets have right now. They have 5 shooters, and you will never have 5 shooters, right? You keep playing Jakob Poeltl, you keep playing Scotty Barnes, you keep playing, Pascal Siakam. None of these guys are shooting as well as Jokic does, right? None of them are as big a threat to score or playmake in this exact area of the court, right? And the other thing is, if you completely flip it, let's just say you have Fred, right? Like let's say you had Fred in this situation, and Fred has the ball in place of Jokic right now, and somebody else is rolling. Well, now someone can actually hug up on him because he's not that much of a finisher in the paint. His percentages at the rim are really poor, which is why, ideally, here's what you want from your lead initiator playmaker. You want, number one, you want them to be extremely diverse offensively. Number two, you want them to make really quick reads. So you want them to have like incredible basketball IQ. And when you have that, whether it be, even if it's not at the Jokic or Doncic level, when you have that, then you have a constant scramble in the offense because this guy now has the ball. He can score at any time. He's willing to shoot, right? And he can play make out of these positions. When Fred VanVleet has the ball in this position, consider this exact position, swap it. Let's just say this is the Raptors offense, and now it's Jakob Poeltl in this situation. Well, he's a good passer. Not Jokic level, but he's a good passer, but the defense would just fall back. If it's Scotty Barnes, or let's not talk about Scotty Barnes right now. If it's Fred VanVleet, the defense will push up into him because he's not that much of a threat to drive. And if they put a bigger defender on him, he's now suddenly shut down a lot as a playmaker because he can't see over the defense, right? So in every single situation, when you try to replace a Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell type player with a Fred VanVleet player, you make the job defense much easier. And so that player has to compensate by going out deeper. Fred VanVleet, in order to have the level of freedom in terms of, let's just say like a Darius Garland, Fred VanVleet has to start his offense 32 feet away from the basket, right? Because he has to give himself that extra gap to attack because he's not as dynamic off the dribble. He's not as quick. He's not as fast. And, the one thing he does have is deep range. So potentially he could back himself off and then create that extra space that way that he needs to attack. But then the problem is that once the defense has a guy at the rim, he's not really that great. So they're going to push him to basically go to the rim. It's the same thing in like if you're a basketball player, if you're like a young basketball player out there, if you can't go left, they're forcing you left. You can't go right, they're going to force you right. If you can't turn over your left shoulder, they're going to force you to turn over your left shoulder every single time. Fred VanVleet does not finish well at the rim. Pascal Siakam does not make really fast decisions. Scotty Barnes does not take shots when they are available to him. Jakob Poeltl can't shoot outside of 8 feet. Every single time you put the ball in one of these guys' hands, right, they are limited. Now, if you put the ball in OG's hands, well, now he can't dribble without falling over himself. You put the ball in Gary's hands, he doesn't see the floor very well. You see what I'm talking about. You have 6 guys who are probably not very effective. However, if you want to split the difference and say, we don't necessarily have the perfect option, but we want to choose the best option, well, I think I'm going to present that in my next part, which is the 5 things that the Raptors can change. But keep this discussion very much in mind, and just look at how dynamic that was. 1, 2, 3, and the Denver Nuggets. Sorry, the Dallas Mavericks have no idea what hit them, and like that's Dwight Powell. Dwight Powell's not a bad defender. Sucks into defenders because he has so much gravity and he's got a mismatch in the post. So Doncic has to help, and boom, right? Now, okay, so that's the end of the film session. This is such a stupid comment. Like, I'm not even trying to be mean. Like, this is nuts. Like, wow. Scotty's less of a threat than Jakob Poeltl. What the fuck, man? I'm trying not to be rude, man, but that's just insane to me that you would say that. A guy who can't score from outside 7 feet, cannot hit free throws, basically is push shot, layup, that's it. Plays a lot below the rim. And you're telling me he's unbelievable. Completely unbelievable. Anyways, all right. So now to my 5 solutions. As promised, this was not clickbait. I do have 5 solutions for the Raptors. They're not going to be as obvious as you may think. It's not bench Fred, trade, Siakam, whatever. It's not that. Okay. Here are 5 solutions that I believe the Raptors could implement if they really want to salvage the season and hopefully win some basketball games and just be better. Do you remember my New Year's resolution? It was to not deal with any toxic people. All right. Number 1. My number 1 solution is bench Jakob Poeltl, or that's only if Fred insists on being the point guard. So if Fred VanVleet insists on being the lead initiator, I need Jakob Poeltl to go to the bench because he will always call for a yak screen because he is inherently selfish and he wants the best screener to open him up. But in doing so, it forces the other 3 guys to basically play 5-on-3. So if he were to use, say, for instance, OG as a screener and Jakob was in the dunker spot, right? This is suddenly a way better option. It's short-sighted and very selfish to use Jakob as a screener in that situation because ultimately, yeah, I mean, honestly, man, sorry not to get derailed. Scotty's been versatile, but Jakob is better around the rim, obviously. Yeah, DeAndre Jordan is better around the rim than Pascal Siakam. Does it make sense to say that DeAndre Jordan is better like at basketball or better at scoring or like any of that stuff? It just makes no sense, man. Yikes. Okay, let me remove this and get myself full screen here. Okay, so number 1 solution, bench Jakob Poeltl if Fred VanVleet insists on being the lead initiator. Or if you are absolutely hellbent on Jakob Poeltl being in your starting lineup and Fred VanVleet still occasionally handling the ball, I want to basically veto any notion of Fred and Jakob pick and roll. Now, this is going to sound very counterintuitive for anyone who's looking at the analytics and saying, well, the success rate on that is so amazing. What you're not seeing is how much less effective it makes the other 3 guys. The other 3 guys are not suited to spacing in this situation, right? You can do this type of action with Draymond and Steph, but look at the other 3 guys. Look at the other 3 guys on the court. You can't do this with 3 Draymonds. Now, I'm not saying that Scotty and Pascal and OG are Draymond, but I am saying that you need elite shooting to run a Fred VanVleet and Jakob pick and roll. And I think that it really doesn't help anyone but those 2 guys. And the numbers will show that they are great, but there's an upper limit to how far you are going to go as a team with those 2 guys taking the vast majority of good offensive opportunities for you. Okay. Number 2, Siakam must cut on the pass. I am sick and tired of watching Pascal Siakam not move without the basketball. It is inherently, I understand it. I get it that a lot of what the Raptors do offensively and defensively is meant to conserve energy for him. That maybe, moving off the ball like he used to is not necessarily as conducive for him getting his offense, but he needs to get easier shots. I like some of the stuff that he did with Jakob Poeltl. He has a lot of gravity as a cutter. Obviously, defenses are going to react to when your best player is, effectively cutting. And I think that he would be really great as and dynamic as a cutter. He'd probably get, 10 more points. And at the end of the day, the points count the same. I think his efficiency would go up. I think it would be much more effective for him to be an off-ball player than an on-ball, constantly on-ball player. Number 3, no more Thaddeus Young. I would like to see Barton and Wieskamp get those minutes. Both those guys can shoot. They're both slightly different. Wieskamp, I think, is a good defender. And I would just like to see Nurse commit himself to this because as the analytics show, the Jakob, Precious, Boucher, Thaddeus Young, you have too many of these guys now. I get it. You think, I just wanna win the offensive glass battle every single game. You win the offensive glass battle whether Thaddeus Young plays or not. You want to just have a playmaker out there. Honestly, too many playmakers and not enough play finishers, right? At this point, everything that hurts spacing, I don't want to see it anymore because the spacing is horrible. Number 4, give Precious Achiuwa a clearer role on both ends. I think Precious Achiuwa is a hell of talent, like very talented player. I think that his role being so complicated is different because like he's not the only player on this team with a complex and somewhat variable role. Siakam has a variable role. OG can sometimes have variable role. Scotty has the most variable role. But those guys are considerably smarter players than he is. And I think you give someone too many options. They start to second guess themselves. They start to overthink, and then they have brain farts. We're not in development season anymore. We're not in the development part. You've already compromised an asset that is worth multiple times more than what Precious Achiuwa is worth in that 2024 first round pick in order to get Jakob Poeltl. The ducks should be in the row. Like you should be done with experimenting with him running the fast break and shit. Like be done with that stuff. He is a really good defender, although his analytics are not great so far this year. I think he impacts defensively. I think he could be so much better. I think his role on offense should be strictly a catch and slash type situation. No dribbling, no probing. There has to be like a direct attack or pass or shoot. The less dribbling, the better for him, right? Um, yeah, that's a hot take to hell. All right. And number 5, run Scotty on the Jokic sets. Like work through him high, work through him low. I think he and Siakam, if you're going to insist on starting Scotty and Siakam, then I would like to see Scotty as a playmaker in that first lineup, right? So here's how I would use Scotty Barnes as a coach. In the first unit, I would run him as my lead initiator. I would move Fred off the ball, Pascal off the ball. I would ask them to just trust the process and just say, okay, he is at least as gifted a passer, if not a more gifted passer than both of you. There's actually no advantage to you guys having the ball and him not having the ball. He finds the open man just as often as you guys do. His passer rating is hella high. He's an A+ passer in the NBA. He does not turn the ball over nearly as much as you want to think that he does. And he's very, responsible with the ball. I don't think he's careless. And I understand that there's this need for Nick Nurse to go with the sure bat or sure hand or veteran presence or whatever. But actually, because of his limitations as an off-ball spacer, even though he's effective at cutting to gaps and he's a very smart player off the ball, I think him being on the ball for the first unit as a playmaker primarily will be very helpful. So run sets, if you insist on running him with Yak, that pick and roll can be very effective because you have two guys, all of whom, like both of whom are big, like big dudes. And if there's a switch in that situation, he can find it and have some sort of action running away from the ball with Siakam, Fred, and OG. So basically put your non-shooters together, push them both towards the basket, collapse the middle, and then find the open shooter. I would go with that play all the time. Then with the second unit, I would run him with spacers, and I would use him as a scorer. Spacers and cutters. So Chris Boucher, Precious Achiuwa's cutters, Wieskamp, Malachi Flynn, whoever, Fred, Gary, OG, one of those guys as spacers, and I would primarily feature him as the go-to scorer for my second unit. And as the first unit guy, I would use him as a Draymond-esque, facilitator, connector. So that's how I would fix this offense in 5 steps. Those would be my 5 adjustments. So to recap, bench Jakob Poeltl if Fred VanVleet insists on being the primary initiator. I would basically primarily initiate if Jakob is starting. I primarily initiate everything through Scotty and Siakam, mainly Scotty, the first unit. Number 2, Siakam must be better off the ball. I notice very often that other players on this team, like Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, sometimes Gary, a lot of OG. I think they do a lot of good stuff off the ball. They will relocate, they will re-angle themselves, reposition themselves to give, the player who has the ball. It's a very selfless way to think about it, right? If I know that me cutting right now is going to complicate your offensive possession, then if I'm a good teammate, I won't do it, right? If I know that me, I don't know, moving 5 feet over is going to give you a much better opportunity to get a clean look, and I don't do that, it's selfish. So players are who you think they are. I think very often what you find is that the guys that you think are selfless are doing selfless things both with the ball and without the ball. And when people want to say, like, how can you call Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam selfish? They only took this many shots, or they had this many assists, or whatever. There's more to being selfish than the number of shots and number of assists you take on a game-to-game basis. It is a style of basketball that you play that is conducive to helping you versus a style of basketball that you play which is conducive to helping the team. And the style of basketball that helps the team doesn't always show up in the box score. It's all that small stuff that you do if you actually care about winning. Scotty Barnes has talked often about moving the ball side to side, and that's a very important part of it. You have so many guys who can collapse the middle and force a break in the defense. How the hell does the ball not move from side to side for this team? It does come down to quick reads, but you have 3 players in your front court who are incredible playmakers for their position. Scotty Barnes is an above average playmaker as a forward or a guard, considerably. You can compare across the NBA, right? Siakam is a very above average playmaker. Jakob Poeltl is a very above average playmaker for their positions. These are great playmakers. You would be absolutely idiotic to not run the offense through these 3 guys. And, it's such a stupid thing to say this sometimes, but like if Fred VanVleet just committed to being off the ball, this team would be so much better. And I know that he has gone on JJ Redick, he's gone on all sorts of shows and said that that's just not the case. And I disagree. And I would debate this with him. Call me. Like, we'll have a debate about this, I swear he's wrong. He's wrong. I have looked at the tape. I've looked at everything. And I don't care what the analytics say, man. I'm telling you, I see the tape. I see how players are being used. And I think that if the analytics tell you that he's a good player on the ball, the analytics are flawed. They are flawed because it's not properly counting for stuff. You can only measure what you measure, and you can only find what you're looking for. And if you look at the effectiveness of other people when he has the ball, you'll always notice that there's somebody massively struggling, massively underperforming. It's not because he's a part of the problem. It's just when you're part of a family, you got to adjust, right? This team is a family, I guess, if you want to talk about it that way, as the trade deadline is over, they're together, right? Is he? How did I not know this? I thought it was a fully guaranteed 2 years. Are you sure? If that's the case, then great. Sucks for him, but that's great for us because I cannot see how the hell you bring him back given the season he's had. I'm honestly surprised they didn't waive him. Like he's been really bad for a guy who's that old. I mean, he had some really really good parts in the early part of the season, but the minute you traded for Yak, this is like done deal for me. Like he cannot play for this team right now. I guess decent injury insurance, probably, but he's a better player than Kem Birch. I'll give him that. But yeah, All right, quickly, I want to, we're at 52 minutes. I said I wanted to keep this under an hour. I wanted to quickly address two things. Number one, am I worried about Scotty Barnes at all? No, I'm not. I gotta say, to those of you who caught on, who caught my interview with Brian, if you want to watch that video, you haven't watched it, by all means, check it out. It's pinned on the channel trailer. And if you want to watch something a little bit more updated, he did do a video with Yahoo Sports, which I was shocked to find only has 1,200 views. And it's a really good conversation in which he talks about a lot of things. It's not just fluff, PR, or whatever. He's really straight up. And I think it was a really good conversation. So I think, if you're curious about Scotty Barnes and curious about Brian, you definitely check it out. It's on Yahoo Sports. I'm not like sponsored by Yahoo Sports. I just, want more people to hear what Brian had to say. Specifically, I'm not worried. Like I listened to that interview. I agree with all of it. He has no doubt in his mind that he's going to be an all NBA guy. Talks about it. He knows it. He knows that the work is going to show. And I have no doubt that his role is not being fairly factored in when people talk about him. One thought that I had yesterday was how often the comment section becomes a spam fest of, Scotty versus Siakam, right? I think that's the triggering point, right? And you lose, like every single time we even broach the subject of, Scotty replacing Siakam eventually in this lineup, or maybe them not being the greatest fits together, there's always like a loss of like 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 subscribers. It's crazy how much this comment triggers people. And the retort or the return, argument from people is always, well, Siakam's this much better than Scotty at this and this much better than him at that. And I got to tell you, defensively, there's like, I think Scotty's better than Siakam defensively right now. You can hate on me all you want. I think it's close, but I think Siakam's step back that he's taken defensively this year, and it's quite a huge step back. You can definitely check the analytics on that one, but he's regressed a lot defensively, and I think that regression mixed with his role on defense being far less complicated and energy consuming than Scotty's, the fact that Scotty's performing just as well, if not better than him on defense, should show you that he's a better defender, in my opinion. So the defense gap is gone. And so the whole, Pascal Siakam's a two-way player. Yeah, relative to Donovan Mitchell and Trae Young, yes, he is. But relative to, like a real two-way superstar like Joel Embiid and Jason Tatum, no, he's not. He's not. He is taking a massive step back there. On offense, he will get there. But you know what's highly encouraging and somewhat interesting to me is that the people who spam, negative comments about Scotty, they talk about him like he is supposed to be a superstar. Like they criticize him for things that objectively no one really thought, other than maybe the most optimistic of fans, thought he would be today. They'll be like, oh, why can't he, finish, like, why can't he score 23 points? Or why can't he, do this all game? Well, I mean, he'll score 10 points in the fourth quarter. You want him to do that all game, and you're asking him for 40 points per game, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is that whether you hate him or you love him, whether you're happy with him or you're upset with him, whether you look at the numbers and you're like, oh my God, he hasn't gotten better at anything. I promise you, he has gotten better at a lot of stuff. You're just not seeing it because I'm not trying to be facetious when I say this, but basketball is more than, Scott makes shots, Scott misses shot. Like there's so much more to it. His role is so much more complicated, and there's amount of work that he's having to do to accommodate the players around him. I mean, just when he starts getting it going, you trade for Jakob Poeltl and it just adds this completely new starter that he's playing with, and he likes him. He likes him, and he wants to play with him, and he trusts him with the basketball. But it doesn't change the fact that playing with a non-shooter is not necessarily going to help you if you are the non-shooter spacing the floor, right? It could help him if he was the lead initiator, which is what I'm advocating for here. So that's the first thing. I'm not really worried about him at all. I think he's made some significant progress this year. I think he could be a lot better. I'm not saying that he is above criticism. Obviously, I think the injury stuff and being hurt and just being overworked, his role complicated, whatever. But I think come playoff time, I am very, very optimistic that he can he can pull together like a heroic performance in potentially a play-in situation, which is why, in all honesty, I'm a little bit optimistic about this team's chances in a play-in situation, especially if they're not facing off against like a really great team like Miami that's just massively underperforming. Like if you face off against Atlanta or the Wizards, I think it could be a toss-up. It could be a toss-up because of how much I expect from him in those situations. And by next year, I really do think like, year one, year two, this whole drag, right? I hope that he will take some time off after this season to just recharge, refresh, reperspectivize, rethink a few things. But one thing that Brian said in that interview that really caught me was that he's trying to get him better during the season. They're not trying to wait for the off season. And I think that that's a really important thing, is that people consider, number one, how hard his role is. He leads the league in defensive versatility, which means that his role on a nightly basis is so complicated. It takes a lot of NBA players 3 years to learn how to guard one position in the NBA. He's having to guard 5 positions almost equally all the time. Not to mention, he's having to make up for defenders that people don't realize are not really that great defenders anymore. Siakam and Fred VanVleet have taken a massive step back defensively. Jakob Poeltl is a worse defender than you remember him being 3 years ago. I guarantee it. He's been amazing for the Raptors in terms of analytics, but there are gaps. All three of these guys give point of attack blow-bys. All three of them. You know, and so OG and Scotty have a really, really difficult task on the defensive end, in my opinion. Finally, I do want to say, I do understand, I'm trying to understand this from Nick Nurse and Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster's side too, which is why they want so badly to anoint these guys as the leaders, to make sure that there's that consistency within the locker room, etc. Guys like Thaddeus Young, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, these older veterans, right? It might surprise people. There was a really shocking stat that the Memphis Grizzlies lead the league in terms of points by players under 27. 95 to 96% of their offense, which is to say points per game, come from players under the age of 27. They don't have a lot of veterans in Memphis. And it shows. It shows, right? You see what's happening with Dillon Brooks. You see what's happening with Ja Morant. Constant controversy. And I'm a really big Ja Morant fan. Really big. But what's happening with that young man probably does not happen if he has veterans around. I think that it's really important to have veterans. I think it's important to have good veterans. Vince had good veterans in Toronto, and I think it really helped him. Antonio Davis, Kevin Willis, Doug Christie, guys like that. Like, he played with a lot of really good vets when he was younger. Muggsy Bogues. God, how can I forget Muggsy Bogues? Right? Having vets around is a good thing. And I understand for a coach like Nick Nurse, who gravitates towards panicked and emotionally reactive behavior, that maybe there's always going to be a sureness with Freddie and Pascal. But I think at some point you do need to look at this and say, there is a player on this team that needs those reps. I genuinely believe that the upside, the maximum upside for OG is higher than Fred and Pascal. I believe the maximum upside for Scotty is higher than all three. So at some point, even though it's not as sure, and even though you're not as battle tested with those two guys, and you didn't win a championship with those guys because OG was out and whatever, and you don't have that memory, at some point we're going to stop having to pretend that this is the Michael Scott Paper Company, and we're just going to have to trust that higher upside is worth leaning into. Because in those big playoff moments, that higher upside leads to higher results. I think OG and Scotty are playoff performers. I think if you have a chance in the play-in or the playoffs in general, like if you make it through the play-in, 1 round, 2 rounds, whatever, and you're in a first-round series against Milwaukee, the only reason you have a 1% chance in that series is because one of those two guys could really go off and have the series of their lifetime, in my opinion. Okay, so I believe that old Maya Angelou quote, which I repeat over and over, which is, when people show you who they are, believe them. I have seen Siakam and Fred VanVleet lead. I think they are stable. They're stable people in general. The final point I want to address is the Fred VanVleet fine, the whole rant about the refs. Do I think it's warranted? Sure, say what you want. I got to tell you, when I heard him say that, I actually liked him a little bit. I was just like, man, this felt so authentic. And I got to say, I've listened to Fred VanVleet for years now, and nothing that he has ever said to the media has ever been without a massive calculation. And to those people who are now saying that he is now the voice of the people, that, oh, he did this for Scotty, go back and listen to what he actually had to say. He didn't mention Scotty Barnes really at all. He didn't mention Scott Foster. He didn't mention any of that. Like, this to him is, it's about him. And as it always is, it's about him. He'll take the fine, whatever. I will say, however, that publicly criticizing the officials this way, I'm very curious to see what kind of impact it will have on his team. Um, I think the Raptors generally, or like the last game, I think they did a much better job of, let's say, controlling their emotions. There were very few heated moments with the referees. It wasn't constant complaining, which I really liked. But I think that it was really, um, I don't think that it's going to help to make yourself, a marked man with the referees. Um, this Raptors versus referees stuff is going to create an adversarial, in my opinion, magnifying glass for the Raptors. Um, Thank you so much, man. High Cats TV. To anyone out there, go check out the High Cats on Spotify or YouTube. I really appreciate what these guys are doing. And also to anyone who did not check out the Scotty mixtape yesterday, we dropped it. Ended up like trying to remix an Easy E song, real MFing G's, because it was an inside joke, and then I think I ended up screwing up the beat and the audio. Some people said it didn't match, and I don't want to be responsible for screwing up a completely like a classic. So I just ended up replacing it. So, if you want something to get yourself hyped up before the game, or you just want to, I think it's just, I'm not like the biggest P Rain fan. I'm just be honest. Like but I did like that song when it came out. I fucked with that song a lot. Like I listened to it a lot. So, um, yeah. Anyway, definitely go check out the High Cats. They released a really cool song with Mercules. So, you know, if you're into Toronto hip hop, definitely check them out. They're from Hamilton. Definitely check it out. All right. Okay. Um, all right. I hope the Raptors have a better performance against the Lakers. LeBron's out. I think for the season, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, Sean. I'm interested to see how the whistle will be tonight as well. Um, in terms of, I expect them to win tonight. I kind of expect them to win this game. I don't know why I think that. I think that that's because um thanks a lot, Sue. I appreciate that. I think, okay, so here, I mean, I'm not, please do not, okay, I will tell you something, but just please do not promise me that you're not going to do anything like bet with this or hold me to it afterward. A feeling that I have tonight, two things. Number one, I think Scotty's going to have a big game. And number two, I think the Raptors going to win. So, yeah. I mean, maybe the Raptors won't win, but I think Scotty's going to have a big game. I think, like, he tried to have a big game last game and he kind of was disappointed, probably by how it turned out for him personally. So I expect him to come out like really focused today. And if he doesn't, well then, it won't be the first time that I've expected a big game from him this year and I haven't gotten it. But I don't want anyone to think that I am losing faith in Scotty. I have 100% faith in the player that he's going to become. It's not because I'm delusional. It's just because I'm really, really, really paying attention to the long term view of this. I think too often we get so caught up in the minutia, and so often I have to remind myself, like, where were we 18 months ago with him? Where are we today? This is a long process. And my final, sort of point is to the people who are just so abrasively against him or assume, that he needs to be better than Siakam for you to get his support, or Judging 21-year-old second-year players should not be equivalent to the way you judge a sixth-year player, seventh-year player who's 28 years old. I don't care how late someone started playing basketball. Professional basketball is professional basketball. Experience is experience. You know, you're gonna like Pascal Siakam's played the Detroit Pistons like what 25, 28 times now in his career, maybe 30 times. Like that's a ridiculous amount of experience. He's gone through deep playoff runs. He's had all that tutelage. He's had NBA training for all those years. You cannot compare him to a 21-year-old. Whenever I have made that comp, whenever I have said that I would rather build this team around Scotty, it's not because I think that Scotty Barnes is a better player. I just think that Scotty Barnes will necessarily and 1000% be a better player at some point very soon. And you can either choose whether that's going to be really, really soon, or you can choose whether that's going to be later. But I would want to do everything in my power if I was this franchise and this organization. Oh my God. Am I seeing this correctly? Uh wow. Yo, like that's our biggest super chat ever. I want to say thank you so much. That's crazy. Respect to you, man, from Taiwan. You are officially SH. You are officially the third person that I directly know of that's supporting this channel from Taiwan. I know there are more, but wow. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Summer Low saying that's Taiwan dollars. No, it is not Taiwan dollars. Wait, is it Taiwan dollars? It's because it says NT. Still, that's a huge thing. I have no idea what Taiwan dollars are, but although I am very, very curious to check now. But nevertheless, thank you so much. That's yeah, that's actually really still that's incredible, and thank you so much. I appreciate it. I did not know actually. That's very interesting and a very fun thing to discover. I've never been to Taiwan. I did not know what NT stands for, but that's still huge. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Um, Maroon Prince, one day you'll get an NBA player dropping a few grand in here. Why? Why would an NBA player drop a few grand here? Um, Yo, man. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, like we're at a point where we signed a sponsorship deal. I mean, you know, we're not talking about the sponsor right now because they still have to work some stuff out on their end. We're not allowed to talk about it yet, but you know, I was talking to a friend of mine about like how we're doing with monetizing this channel, and when I shared with him, you know, how we're doing, he was just like, "That's crazy! You've grown so fast." And really, a lot of it is because of these super chat stickers and because of the sharing and stuff. And so, yeah, some people are trolling because, you know, we lost like 40 subscribers over the last couple of days after the low light videos. But that stuff is so irrelevant. What I know, what I feel, is even though the views are down a little bit right now for every Raptor YouTuber, dude, like we're still like massively outperforming just about every other space and every other Raptor creator in terms of post game lives. Um, Not that it's a competition, but that to me is worth a lot. Is very meaningful to me, and that is what effectively is appealing to sponsors. They want to make sure that they can talk to somebody who has an actual space, who has an actual platform in this space, you know, and that's what's creating the boom, right? So I'll promise you guys, you know, if you keep tuning in, I'll promise to keep putting my effort and putting my best effort forward to creating the best content possible and being very honest and direct about my thoughts. But I'm not gonna mince words about it. Obviously, like the success of this channel has been totally on the backs of the people who tune into these lives and the people who comment and create so much engagement on those videos. So I want to say thank you, and definitely we'll be back for the post game live. My girlfriend made some pizza, so I'm gonna. It was like right before the live it went up, and she was like, "I'm making pizza right now," and I was like, "Damn it, I'm gonna miss it." But hopefully there's still some left. And enjoy the game. Um, Yeah, enjoy the game. And yo, for sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's insane like that we could be doing a live at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. and there'll still be like 180, 190 people there. I'd be like, wow, this is crazy. So, it is about the time. It's not just about super chat stickers and comments and all that stuff. It is actually just about the time because time is money and time is valuable. And, how much time people give to watching these videos and sticking in these lives and stuff is very important. In fact, like that's the whole point of this community. This community does not exist if I just talk into a microphone to myself. It's like so much of this what we're doing here is you guys talking to each other. So I'll see you guys after the game. And is it homemade pizza? It's no, it's not. It's store bought. Whatchamacallit, store bought. Delicio. It's like Delicio stuff, or Dr. Ecker's, something like that. But still, I mean, I'm hungry. I'm hungry, yo. Like it's not homemade. Um, yeah, yeah. It's not Delicio. It's Dr. Ecker's, or I don't remember what it is, but it's something else. It's not Delicio. We had bad experience with those frozen ones. But yeah, pizza is life. Yo, for sure. When I was 4 years old, I used to eat pizza like every single day, like nonstop. It was crazy. All right, we'll talk after the game. Have a good one, guys. Peace.